Welcome everyone to the 12th annual Film Fest Petaluma. I'm Mike Traina, the festival director, and this is the first of our 2021 short film panels, Borderlines. It's been a long time coming, and although we miss our friends at the Mystic Theater, we are so grateful to the amazing Alexander Valley Film Society team for being such great hosts and collaborators in making this year's virtual event possible. I also want to give a huge shout out to my incredible programming team who have collectively viewed more than 1,000 short films this year to create our lineup. I also want to acknowledge our primary sponsor, Santa Rosa Junior College, particularly the Petaluma campus, which is the home of the Petaluma Film Alliance, and our extraordinary theater, the Carol L. Ellis Auditorium, which we can't wait to reopen for film screenings. I know we have some JC students watching today, which we hope will be able to ask some questions in the second half of our panel. The college offers a great mix of film studies and film production courses, so if you want to learn more about the craft of filmmaking, please visit us. Although we're in cyberspace today, I also want to say that we'd normally be gathering on the traditional land of the Coast Miwok people, past and present, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it through the generations. A couple housekeeping tips today before we get started. If you need tech assistance during the festival, please check out the FAQ on avfilmsociety.org for live chat assistance all day. We're also providing audio captioning through Zoom. Just click the CC link at the bottom of your screen. You can post your questions in the chat and we'll try to cover as many as possible, but please be on your best behavior as this is a safe space for everyone to celebrate film, filmmakers, and the stories that they tell. And finally, don't forget to vote for your favorite shorts on the page where you stream them. The audience favorite will receive a $1,000 cash prize courtesy of our friends at Alexander Valley Film Society. So again, big thanks to the festival for partnering with us this year. I am so excited about this panel today. So I'm going to start introducing our fantastic lineup of guests. From Los Angeles, the writer, director, producer, and editor of The Dishwasher, Sam Roden. From New York City, the director of MARISOL, Zoé Salicrup Junco. From Madrid, Spain, the director of Bills Included, Javier Masipe. From Puerto Rico, the director of The Blue Cape, Alejandra López. From Uruguay, the director of KINI, Hernán Olivera. And do we have our last guest? Not yet, but I'll keep an eye out because we're expecting Ceres to join us as well. So welcome everyone. How we're going to run this today is I'm going to kind of talk about each of the films with you for a few minutes. Oh wait, I have one more introduction I guess I want to make, and that is I'm really happy to have one of my esteemed colleagues from Santa Rosa Junior College here who's going to help with translation today, English professor Freddie Martinez. So I'm going to welcome him to the panel as well. Thank you, Freddie, for being here. All right, so I think I'm going to we're going to take the films in the order that they appear in the program. And so Sam, will start with The Dishwasher. The Dishwasher is so well written in terms of plot points and dramatic beats. I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit about where the idea for the story came from. And I know that you have a writing, directing, producing partner, Nick Hartanto, who also was the DP on your film. And having such a close collaboration is such a challenge. So in addition to the inspiration, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about your creative process working with another person so closely on a project like this.
Yeah, well, actually, those two things are totally interconnected. Let's see. The Dishwasher, so yeah, I co-wrote and co-directed this, as you said, and this is, Nick is somebody that I met in college, actually, like the first day of college. We're both from the Bay Area, but went to college in Boston, and I think that it was just one of those things when we found out, having just moved all the way across the country and feeling very far from home, when we found out that we both knew some of the same people in San Francisco, it just kind of led to a quick friendship. And then we had similar tastes and went through film school together and practiced and learned how to do a lot of the stuff together. So I think it's an unusual collaboration in that we actually learned to do this stuff together. I think I've done collaborations with other people and really enjoyed it that I've met later in life. But there's something very, you just almost understand what the other person's thinking without them saying it, which can be a problem at times because you can start to assume things without having good communication. But the good side to it is that I think there's a really deep connection in terms of taste and what is interesting to you. And in terms of how the story came about, Nick and I both have done a lot of different kinds of work through high school, college, and then even for the first several years out of college, while we were writing and stuff, we did lots of random jobs. And both of us had a real passion for food, and both of us cooked in restaurants, actually in the Bay Area, funny enough, one in Sebastopol and one in San Francisco. But there's a seed of a story, the seed of the story, which is that basically this chef last minute wanted to add this thing to the menu, and he thought maybe that the dishwasher of the restaurant would know where to get the best tortilla, because in real life they had been in this neighborhood in Sunset Park not long before, and he thought, oh, this is his chance to kind of get the real thing, and it could be like a shortcut to getting this on the menu quick and cheap. That happened in real life to Nick while he was working at a restaurant in Brooklyn. And I think, and what happened in real life is that the guy disappeared for a long time, to a point that they were really concerned about him. And he wasn't responding to phone calls or anything like that. And eventually he did come back with this nice package of tortillas. And years later, when my film partner actually moved to that neighborhood, Sunset Park, he found that he couldn't find where this guy must have gotten these tortillas from, because at least at that time, it wasn't something you could easily just buy. And so he just started thinking about where did he get it from? And the more we thought, the more we realized, no doubt, he probably had a family member make it. And I don't know, I think we just kind of kept brainstorming and sort of enjoyed the sort of combination of the seriousness of the people involved in a story like that with the sort of ridiculousness of sort of an odyssey for a tortilla. Sounds pretty ridiculous at the same time. So yeah, I've rambled all over the place there, but I don't know, did that answer the main question?
Yeah, I wonder if you could tell us some details about your shoot, like what did you shoot it on, and how long was the production window?
So let's see, it was a very low budget shoot. It was funded completely by the two of us, and but we had made several short films over the years before that, and I think that there was a real hope that we could up our storytelling, the technical aspects, but especially just kind of the drama of it, I guess. So we spent a lot of time writing it. I think we spent a year writing it probably, and there were a lot of drafts, and it changed a lot. And then, so the big thing that we had going for us is locations. We didn't pay for any locations, which is pretty incredible because there's 2 different restaurant locations in the movie. And we used people that we had worked for there that were very nice. There was a local Mexican restaurant that we eat at all the time, and they were really nice and let us use it for a location. Casting was probably the biggest tricky thing, just because, just finding people that can play the roles well without a casting director is not an easy thing to do, but we got lucky with that.
Can you say how did you find Kevin? Because Nicholas, really a lot of the movie carries on his shoulders.
Yeah. So Nick, my film partner, basically decided he would start watching every New York produced TV show, like, you know, like the cop dramas and things like that, because so many of the actors cycle through those shows that live in New York. And Kevin actually wasn't in any of those, but he started finding people that way. So there were a few actors that we found that way, and then we just reached out to them personally. But somewhere along the line, Nick remembered watching oh God, what's the name? What's that Mel Gibson movie called? Is it Get the Gringo or something like that? I can't remember what the name of it is. I've never seen it. I think it's called Get the Gringo. But anyway, it's a movie that came out, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years ago. And Kevin was one of the two. He and Mel Gibson are the leads, but Kevin was a very little boy in that. But Nick remembered how good he was and looked him up. And he had been since then in a few movies. He was in a Sundance movie and a bunch of TV shows and things like that. And so I just decided that because I knew our budget was going to be limited, before trying to deal with his agents, I just Instagram messaged him directly and asked him if he would be interested in reading the script. And he said yes, being that he's at the time was 19. I think he was very good on social media, much better than me. And he read the script and liked it. And then, so I think once he liked it, then I just felt like we could probably work it out. And so then I started speaking with his agent, and you know, it was just the normal kind of back and forth. But yeah, and then the guy that played the chef is a friend of mine from college. He's been in a lot of stuff, and I just knew if we talked about it a lot, he could do it. And yeah, it just sort of fell into place. But I think we shot it over 4 days in New York, in Sunset Park, and in Park Slope, which is the neighborhood just north of there. And it was, yeah, I mean, I was sleeping on Nick's couch, and Nick's apartment is the vast majority of the grandmother's apartment. So the scene in the kitchen and even the basement, all that is Nick's apartment. So we just repurposed it. And then, yeah, we were able to get the local Mexican restaurant down the street that we used to eat at a lot. They were very nice. And then the other restaurant was a place where Nick used to work. And the chef was very generous about letting us use the place. So yeah, we shot it in about 4 weeks and just, you know, banged it out. It was shot on one of the early Blackmagic cinema cameras, you know, lit combination of natural light and a little bit of small film lights. But I think it was like maybe a 4-person crew and a few friends that would help out for half days or things like that. But it was very small. But it was very, I mean, it was intense because of how small it was. I'm sure this is true of all the movies that are done. But it was really fun, and the intimacy of that is something that actually I want to try to do again on the next project that I work on, because I think there's something about that just felt very positive to me. The experience of it felt very positive.
I've one final question for you, and that's, I know your film premiered at Tribeca in 2019, and you've had an incredible festival run, and you sold it to HBO. So I'm just curious, kind of, how has the experience of your film on the festival circuit and sales sort of influenced or shaped your career? Or what have you learned about the business of making short films in retrospect after the 2 years of screening this film and then selling this film?
Well, I would never make a short film and expecting to make any money back. And we actually are going to be pretty close to breaking even in the end, which is totally unbelievable to me. But that in the end, to me, that is not really that important. Let's see. I mean, doing the festival circuit has been great. I think that one of the biggest things that I honestly, I sort of knew this before the Dishwasher, even with just smaller successes, but this experience really made me just feel like it's amazing how much time I feel like as you're trying to get better at all this stuff, you spend not showing your movies to audiences, you know, whether it's bad scripts that never get made or good scripts that never get made, or, you know, projects that don't come out as well as you want them to, or they're good, but they just they don't get into festivals because they're super competitive and there's so many good movies out. But I just, it's so gratifying to have people watch it, even if they end up not liking it, but just taking it seriously. And then you can have a conversation about it. And then of course, the people that understand it and like it, of course, is even better. But it's just, I think that's the thing. I feel very grateful to have audiences taking it seriously, you know, as opposed to just showing it to my roommate or something like that.
Well, yeah,
So I think
certainly,
that's great.
yeah, a lot of people have seen it, and congratulations on the film, and thank you for joining us
Yeah,
today.
thanks.
I know, Zoe, you have something in common with Sam, and that's that your film also has been sold to HBO. So we'll get there, but I kind of want to maybe start from the beginning. One interesting fact, I guess, I learned when I was reading a little bit about the background of your film is that you were born and raised in Puerto Rico, which of course we're going to be talking with Alejandra in a moment, and that or at least I read, the 2016 election and Hurricane Maria had a sort of impact or influence on the inspiration of this film, or sort of your trajectory as a filmmaker. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of your production.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me. I think it's so wonderful when I get to see another Puerto Rican female filmmaker in the same panel. It's finally things are changing. Yeah, Marisol is the first short film that I direct, but I didn't write. So it was a brand new experience for me. I went to film school, and a lot of what we were taught was, you know, write what you know and kind of like form yourself as an auteur. So this was a pretty refreshing opportunity for me. I was approached by Tim Elliott, who wrote the script. He also stars in it. He plays the ICE agent, and Lauren Soa, the producer. And they're a couple and an amazing producing partners. So you know, they came to me because I have kind of been crafting my career, you know, behind female-led Latina stories. And you know, tell you the truth, when I first interviewed for the project, I fell in love with it because it was such a human story about immigration. You know, I think it's important to tell kind of like the grand stories about immigration at the border, but I think it's also equally important to tell smaller, more intimate, personal stories about what it's like to be an immigrant in this country, you know, day to day. And that's what Marisol did. So I immediately fell in love with it. I had my reservations because I'm not Mexican, and you know, technically I'm not an immigrant, I'm a migrant. But I was able to kind of find my truth in Marisol, the character, because if you know a little bit about Puerto Rican history, you know that our identity is pretty complicated. So even though we are born into US citizenship, it is quite complicated, and we're not treated as equal when we come to this country. So I could relate on many levels to the character and the world. And, you know, I've been living in New York for the past more than 10 years. So my worldview has kind of opened up to other, you know, Latina stories, Latina friends, Latino circles. And I just felt very compelled to tell this story together with Emma Ramos, who did an amazing job. She's an amazing actress, and she had worked with me on a few commercials. She's actually more into comedy, but I thought, you know, she has a thing for drama, and she really made this character hers.
Absolutely.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say she absolutely carries the film. Yeah, terrific. And I was going to ask you how she came into the project, but I guess the previous relationship.
Yeah, we worked together on a few Sony commercials, completely opposite, you know, aura in terms of project. And but she's a very authentic, very smart woman, and just very open to the collaborative process. So it was kind of like just like a very honest experience in terms of, you know, being able to share, you know, our stories with each other and challenging ourselves, and just like having a common goal of creating the kind of cinema that we have been craving to see on screen since, you know, we can remember. So I know Tim, he did write the script right after the 2016 elections. I believe he had like some sort of nightmare. Tim is super into politics, and he's a huge humanitarian, and so he was very compelled to tell the story about immigration right after Trump came into office. And as a white man, he's very aware of the privilege he has in society, and so he just felt like it wasn't his place to tell the story, and that's how he then brought me into the project. We brought Emma, and we just kind of like made it a very collaborative effort to tell this story. How did Hurricane Maria affect us? Well, I mean, we shot this film right after Hurricane Maria. So for me personally, it was extremely challenging because all I wanted to do was go home and be with my family and friends and make sure everybody was okay. And it was just like, Emma was actually also doing a huge fundraiser right around that time, because there was also an earthquake that had hit Mexico, if I'm not mistaken, right around that time. So it was like a dual fundraiser. So it was just like really challenging to because of circumstances of life, like how can we use our art to almost like a convey, but also channel the feelings and the things that each of us were going through in that moment. It was just like a really heated and complicated time in history, I think, for a lot of Latinos, just with like everything that was happening with politics, with Trump, and then on top of that, for islanders who were in the mainland dealing with Hurricane Maria, and kind of just like, it's kind of like watching, I don't know, like a family member, like the closest person to you and your heart, to just get like abused, and like they're on the ground and you're just like witnessing them getting kicked. And so I don't know, for me, it just propelled me to push through and continue to use my voice to the best of my ability. And that's kind of how I see myself serving my community. And that actually led me to another short film that I did about Maria as well. So I think it just like affected me emotionally, spiritually, and somehow I channeled that into the work.
Were there any particular challenges of shooting a rideshare story in New York City? It seems like a mad environment in terms of traffic and setup and all of that. Any perspective on tackling that challenge?
Yes, I always kid around that the reason why I got hired to do this short film is because I am a short person and I fit in the hatchback of a car. And that is where I directed the entire film. So in all the scenes where you see Marisol driving, I'm actually in the back of the car, directing them, which obviously I don't suggest that to anybody. It is not insurance friendly. But you do everything for the arts, so it was challenging in that sense, but we have fun, and you just make sure you prepare yourself the most as you can in pre-production. Like I said, I've been living in New York for a long time, so planning out the routes and knowing when's the best time to go with traffic and stuff like that. You just when there's a will, there's a way. So challenging production, but overall really fun.
I have one final question for you, kind of on the business side of things. I know you were a fellow at the Sundance Institute in screenwriting and women's film financing, and that you've done some work for a nonprofit, Creative Capital. As I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, you sold your film to HBO. Anything you can share, since we have some film students who are always thinking about the challenges of financing films or distribution? What did you learn through the process of these experiences and selling your own project?
Focus on yourself. And I know that's really hard because there's just so much content, and there's just so many filmmakers, and so much competition and so much rejection. But I think when you focus on yourself and you center and ground yourself, you can really hit the core of why you are put in this earth to do whatever you're put in this earth to do. And you can really just push yourself and realize that there are no bounds, and you can just kind of throw yourself in there and do it. And you don't really have to wait for anybody or institutions or schools or anything to do what you're meant to do. So I would say just like not think about it too much and put your heart into it, and just don't look sideways, just keep going.
How did HBO find your film?
How did HBO find my film? I had a friend for the longest time. She actually picked up one of my first short films, Gabby. And we just always stayed in touch. It's one of those like female industry colleagues that we support each other. We developed like a friendship, and she was like working at HBO, and I sent her a rough cut. I wasn't even like done with the film, being like, hey, can I get notes on this? And a week later, HBO called me. It was funny because, I didn't really know much about HBO distributing short films. So when they called me, my answer was, can you wait? To which they responded, no, this is not how it works. But, it's one of those things where I was just focused on getting notes from, people that are very close to me, that I trust. And it turned into an opportunity that I was not expecting. So
you're developing it into a series. Did I read that?
Yes, that's correct. We're developing it into a series. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you here. And yes.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
Good luck with further pursuit with it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next guest, Javier from Spain with bills included. Freddie, I think you're going to need to step up and help with some translation. But I'd like, before we jump into the film, to begin with a little bit of background. I read, Javier, that you studied directing in Cuba. And I wonder if you could, before we jump into the plot, describe that experience and what insights you gained from leaving Spain and spending time in Cuba. Freddie, you want to?
Yeah, so Javier, Miguel quiere saber que si puedes compartir un poco sobre su experiencia de ir a estudiar en Cuba y cómo fue que se fue de España a Cuba y luego regresó a hacer su trabajo en España otra vez.
Javier, you're muted.
Yes.
Sí, yo primero estudié en España cine 5 años, la carrera de cine, y en Cuba lo que estudié fue como unos meses en la Escuela de Cine de San Antonio de los Baños. ¿Queréis ir traduciendo o sigo?
So he's saying that, he spent 5 years studying film in Spain, and then he went to Cuba for a few months to study at a university there.
La Escuela de Cuba tiene mucha relación con toda Latinoamérica y con España. Es muy común que compañeros míos, al terminar los estudios, van a ampliar a Cuba, que es una escuela que sobre todo van directores en activo. Ahí han estado los mejores, desde Scorsese, George Lucas, David Lynch, han ido a dar clase a esa escuela, y entonces yo siempre tuve muchas ganas, y además por la afinidad del idioma, que las clases son en español, pues me interesó mucho y aprendí mucho ahí.
He's saying that the school in Cuba has always had a lot of good connections with other filmmakers in countries throughout Latin America and Spain. And so that a lot of the best directors have taught at the school, from George Lucas to others. And he wanted that opportunity to be able to take classes with a lot of these directors, especially since they're teaching in Spanish. And so this was it was a good opportunity for him to develop his craft outside. Yeah.
I know that Freddie and I had a chat about the program before it started, and I'm going to throw a question to Freddie that he's going to have to say in English and then I guess translate, but it relates to the inspiration of Bills Included. So I'll hand it off to you, Freddie.
Yes. So one of the questions that I had as I was watching it, as a Californian, I see a lot of parallels with the housing shortage that we're experiencing here. And I kind of wanted to get a little bit more about the context of the housing situation in Madrid. Javier, una cosa que me gustó mucho sobre su película fue las similares cosas que están pasando aquí en California, que no hay muchas casas o apartamentos y que los precios están muy caros, y quería saber un poco sobre el contexto de cómo está la situación allá, sobre los precios de las casas.
Sí. Ese es un tema que está en el centro de la política ahora mismo en España todo el tiempo. Se está intentando, de hecho, hacer una ley para limitar el precio del alquiler, porque en las principales ciudades, por ejemplo en Madrid o en Barcelona, es normal que una persona se gaste el 80% de sus ingresos en pagar el alquiler.
Yeah, so Javier's saying that a housing shortage is something that is very much in the political discourse in Spain, especially in Madrid. That it is one of the main inspirations for the film, and it's very common for people to be spending about 80% of their income on housing. But that's just how severe the crisis is there.
La idea del cortometraje surgió yo escribí el guión con otro chico que en ese momento estaba buscando piso y no había manera de encontrar un piso, y además los castings eran más complicados que para encontrar un trabajo, por ejemplo, ¿no? Entonces los dos dijimos que teníamos que buscar una manera de denunciar la situación y lo hicimos desde el humor con una situación distópica, ¿no? Planteando una situación distópica.
I mean, unfortunately, Javier got cut off a little bit. So what I heard was that part of his inspiration was that when he was writing the short with his partner, at the same time he was trying to find an apartment to rent out, and that journey was extremely difficult for him, and it seemed even harder than it was to get a job at the time. And so he wanted to create a film which was kind of denouncing this shortage in Spain and try to come up with a way of understanding the situation. And desafortunadamente se cortó un poco cuando estaba hablando hacia el final.
Ajá.
No sé si puede repetir lo que dijo hacia el final.
Sí, al final decía que nosotros que pensamos que había que denunciar esta situación del piso, de la búsqueda de piso tan difícil, pero pensamos que era mejor hacerlo desde el humor, planteando una situación al límite entre la distopía y el surrealismo.
And so he wanted to take a surreal or kind of blend dystopic story with surrealism, and approach this very serious topic with a little bit more humor, and not as much from maybe a political angle.
I have a question about the choice of aspect ratio. I think on this program, Bills Included is the only film in the square format. I wonder about your intent behind that choice in the storytelling.
Miguel quiere saber sobre la relación del aspecto, que su película fue la única que estaba como más cuadrada que las demás, y qué fue su intención detrás de esa decisión.
Hay varios motivos. El primer motivo es que pensamos que haciendo el formato más cuadrado iba a ser más agobiante el espacio. Como es una película claustrofóbica de dos personas que comparten espacio, pues de alguna manera al cerrarlo más podía ser más agobiante.
So he's saying that there's various motives behind that. First and foremost, that if you have a square frame, you're kind of trying to build in that claustrophobia into the form of the film, and you're trying to be closed in there with the characters of the film as a spectator.
Otro motivo es que el protagonista del cortometraje hace fotos a los vecinos y hace fotos Polaroid. Y las fotos Polaroid son en formato cuadrado y pensábamos que de alguna manera era como una rima entre lo que él hace y nosotros hacemos. El protagonista es un romántico que hace fotos Polaroid, también el formato cuadrado es un formato ya romántico, ¿no? Ya ha quedado atrás en la mayor parte de usos y era una manera de decir que nosotros como directores nos parecemos a él como protagonista.
So another motive was to try to build a relationship between the protagonist of the film, who's a photographer and whose main work is through Polaroids, and whose aspect ratio is very similar to that of the film. And so to kind of build a connection to the protagonist and to kind of view his own worldview through a more romantic lens, he adopted that perspective of the protagonist.
Your film culminates in this powerful moment when Joaquin must decide whether to intervene with the other, el otro. I wonder if you could speak about directing this moment and what you hope to reveal when he doesn't reach out as the other is breaking down on the sofa.
El momento más poderoso de la película es cuando Joaquín está llorando y entonces el protagonista no hace una conexión con el hombre que está llorando y qué son las que está tratando de significar con esa acción del protagonista.
Bueno, de alguna manera en esa escena lo que se pone el punto álgido del conflicto central del corto, ¿no? Hay un conflicto entre una regla que es deshumanizadora, ¿no? Que plantea la inmobiliaria, y el instinto humano que todos tenemos, que es un instinto de empatía y de relación, ¿no? Entonces, toda la dramaturgia va llevando a ese momento en el que uno parece que es imposible no hacer algo cuando una persona a tu lado está llorando, ¿no?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the central tensions behind the film was kind of this natural reaction for us to want to empathize with others, but then kind of being caught up in an environment where there's a lot of dehumanization going around with other people that you live with, on a day-to-day basis. And so that's kind of one of the central tensions that he wanted to touch on.
Y me han preguntado muchas veces cómo es dirigir, porque lo normal es que cuando trabajes con actores lo importante es la relación, crear la relación entre ellos, ¿no? En este caso es lo contrario, posiblemente nunca tenga que hacer un corto que se base en personas que comparten espacios sin relacionarse y me han preguntado si es especialmente difícil y la verdad es que no, especialmente, porque simplemente se trataba de que cada persona tuviera el conflicto consigo mismo, ¿no? Y entre ellos, pues, no hubiera relación.
So one of the questions that Javier has often been asked deals with wondering if it's been difficult to work with actors who do not have to really build a relationship with one another, because often you're taught that one of your central goals as a director is to have this connection between your actors. And for Javier, he says, no, it wasn't really that difficult, because the tension that exists in the film is within each character. And so part of the challenge is developing that central conflict within each character and having them kind of act that out for the camera.
I have a last question about your film's release and your future project. One, I know, congratulations. I know this film was nominated for a Goya, a Spanish Oscar this year. And I'm curious how that experience possibly created opportunities for you. And the second part of the question is, I heard you're preparing a feature that's a co-production between Spain and Argentina. And I wonder if you could tell us anything about that.
Miguel quiere saber cómo le ha transformado los premios que ha recibido por esta película, cómo le ha transformado su carrera o su vida, y también que está ahorita en el proceso de hacer un nuevo proyecto en colaboración con alguien en Argentina y usted en España, y que si puede compartir algo sobre ese proyecto.
Sí, los premios del cortometraje no me han transformado la vida nada, porque realmente en este caso yo estaba trabajando en la película, en el largometraje a la vez, y casi no he podido ni ir a festivales ni nada durante este año, porque estaba totalmente sumergido en el otro proyecto. Entonces, en este caso ha sido un poco extraño, ¿no? Esa es la primera parte de la...
Yeah, so I mean, this experience has been kind of weird because he's won awards for it, but that he's been very busy working on his next projects, and so he hasn't really been able to. I mean, it hasn't really changed much for him because he had already had things in the work, and so he's kind of been focusing on that these last, last period in his life.
Y el largometraje empezamos a filmar el 9 de marzo del año pasado, o sea que se tuvo que parar por la pandemia, justo al tercer día de rodaje. Es una película que se llama La Estrella Azul, Blue Star, y es una película sobre un rockero que es una especie de Sugarman español. Y es una historia fantástica de un viaje que hizo por Latinoamérica un rockero que se llama Mauricio Aznar, y lo produce una de las empresas más importantes de España, y esperemos que se pueda ver en Estados Unidos, porque creo que os va a gustar.
So he started filming this next project on March 9th of last year, and then the pandemic hit. And so, he was only able to film for 3 days, and that's about it. It's about a rock and roll star who is traveling through Latin America, and it's telling his journey throughout that time period. But like he said, he hasn't had a chance to do much because of the pandemic.
Well, we're so happy to have shown your film in this program, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, our next film, The Blue Cape, Alejandra López. I think one of the most remarkable things about your film is that you're telling both a micro story about this family at the same time that you're telling this macro story about Puerto Rico and the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. I wonder, and you do it all in a 5-minute runtime, which is really quite remarkable. Can you talk about both conceptualizing your film and distilling it down to 5 minutes in scope?
Bueno, pues, hola, Zoé. I met Zoé not long ago. And hi, everybody, and thank you for including my short film. I mean, where do I start? I mean, I always knew I wanted to make a very short film because it's such a delicate subject. I didn't want to go over dramatic, and I just wanted to get straight to the point. What else? I mean, the script, I mean, the idea came very quickly to me. I wrote the script in 5 minutes, maybe, or less. And well, I was in LA at the time, so I came home for Christmas, and I was looking around, and I figured, how can I help so that the world know truly what happened, because the media can be, quite a liar sometimes, so I am a storyteller, I am a filmmaker, and I can tell the truth, so I just wanted to, how people say, just give me 5 minutes of your attention and I can just change the way you think. So that was the initial idea of basically what I wanted to tell this short so quickly, can you just give me 5 minutes and you can really see what happened down here.
The color and design of your film is so gorgeous. I'm curious about the presence of the color blue, which is both, significant in a figurative way and a literal way because of all the tarps covering the damaged houses and so forth. I'm curious how that developed, whether that was something that came from the very beginnings, it's in your title and elements of your design, or if it's something after you saw the wreckage of the island, whether, the presence of that color was shaped as a result of real life observations. Yeah.
Well, these are very good questions, Mike. Okay, so like you mentioned, yes, the short is very simple in the sense that it's about the journey of this family, right, during the hurricane. But what a lot of people don't get, and they don't need to understand the A story, is that it is a very political short film. Let me explain. Like Zoé said, we're a Commonwealth of the United States. And after the hurricane, basically the only thing that was given to us were the blue tarps. And we felt, wow, this is going great. They're really going to help us through this disaster. But at the end, that was basically, that was everything that was given to us. So that's where the blue tarp comes from. And then in Puerto Rico, we basically have 3 political parties, and they stand out because of their colors. For example, red means you want to stay a colony, green means you want independence, and blue means you want to become a state. So now that you guys know all that information, basically, at the beginning, the little boy feels like a superhero with the blue cape, right? He feels like he can actually help his grandfather, with the help of the US, we're going to get through this. But at the end, he realizes it doesn't really work. So his grandfather still died, and like a good coming of age story, he matures very quickly, and he actually buries his blue cape along with his grandfather, so that's the political of it all, and hence that's why the color blue. And at the beginning, the little car that he plays is also blue, so it's a color that he really loves, and at the end he actually hates.
So much of your film rides on your young actor. You track him in very close shots as he traverses across the island. How did you cast your young star in the film?
Well, he's never acted before. The casting director, she actually find him in an area in Puerto Rico that suffered greatly after the hurricane. So here was more than an actor, a little human being that actually went through this. So it was very easy for him to just unfortunately remember all of it. Obviously his grandmother and his father were always on set, obviously. And he was, that's just pure talent. Like, what can I do? It was 12 hours of physically and emotionally demanding role. And by hour 13, he was, I want to do it again. You know what I mean? So it was a blessing. He was a blessing for sure. Without him, the short wouldn't have worked at all.
There's such amazing drone shots in the film, and the footage is just so breathtaking. Where is Puerto Rico today in relation to recovery?
Well, we are better. We're not fully recovered. You still drive around and you see, broken, fallen electrical poles. Like once a week, my power goes out still here, but like I said, we're okay. We're alive, we still have each other. And, we keep fighting every day to see the best of our little island. So I guess the answer is we're okay.
I read that this film and perhaps other work in your background has got you directing a project for Marvel Entertainment. Is that correct? And if so, can you tell us anything about that?
No, sorry. I signed an NDA.
Okay, so you are doing the project, but you can't tell us anything about it. Well, congratulations on that. It's a very exciting prospect, and gosh, thank you for your short, and congratulations on such a successful run that your short has had. Really super impressive and moving and resonant. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, the last film, and then we're going to open it up for some questions. And if our attendees have a question, you can raise your hand, and we're hoping to actually bring a couple of you on screen if you'd like to ask a question directly of the panel, who we'll invite to turn their cameras on again in a moment. But it's just Hernan and I, and so let's talk about KINI. I have a question for you first about your background, that you started in the advertising world and transitioned to filmmaking. Can you just talk a little bit about that transition and maybe what skills you developed while working in advertising that you found applicable in the filmmaking industry?
Yes, so here in Uruguay, I studied communications, social communications, which is the career that can take you to work in advertising, journalism, or film. And that's why I, like, towards midway into my grade, I started working in advertising as a producer, like an ad agency producer. So I was working in a department within the advertising agency that you get a grasp on how to work in film, you know, in TV advertising and like the audiovisual world. When I went into my career, I wanted to study film and like work on film, but that was like the first gig I got, and like it was like a good place to start my career. And it was great because I got to know, like I got to work with many production companies here very closely with directors, always supervising from the advertising agency point of view. And I learned a lot from them. But when I finished my thesis for my graduate, for my undergrad study, I had to take a decision, and I had because do I want to stay in this field, or do I want to move towards film, which is what I wanted to do in the first place. So then I decided to do a master's degree, and I went to Chicago, to Columbia College, to do an MFA on directing, and that's when I did my move to film, my definitive move. But I brought with me like a lot of knowledge of like how it is to work on a professional set, how to work a lot of shots in like one day, you know, because ads work like that. And it was a great experience. It was like like another undergrad career, you know, like, and that happened for 6 years. And then I did my master's degree, and here I am now.
Can you tell us, I know you're both a writer and director of KINI, where did the inspiration from this story, for this story, come from?
So the producer came to me with one image, which was this old lady blowing up her house with her entire offspring inside. And that was like a challenge, you know, like, okay, you have this, what do you do with it? So I started thinking, like, how, like, what would this old lady take, what would take her to this decision, right? So I started like crossing that image with themes that I find very interesting, like, yeah, like descendants, offspring, family, the genealogical tree, you know, and that was the family tree. So I started thinking about the background of her family and like what would take her to take this decision. And I started like unraveling all of the story backwards. So it worked like as a reverse story. I don't know. I started from the end, and then I had to think of the entire thing leading up to that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You know, your story begins with a broadcast from the voluntary human extinction movement, and there's a comment that the planet is suffering from a pandemic. I wonder, was this all written and done before the pandemic, or did it influence, the pandemic influence that broadcast or reference at the beginning of the film? I just wonder if you could speak to the origins of that particular idea in relation to your film.
Yes, no, actually there was no COVID-19 in the horizon. Like, we wrote it in 2018 and shot it towards the end. We post-produced in 2019 and we premiered in 2020 in January. So everything happened like really, it was like a huge coincidence. But this is like from a pre-COVID world, like the pandemic itself. That's like the thought behind it. But it was like really, because many people ask that, so it's a really happy coincidence in a way.
Your film is so dependent on the very distinctive personalities of all of the children in relation to the mother. Obviously, it would require a really methodical casting process to make sure they all have very different personalities and signatures. Could you just talk about assembling the family, the team casting your film? Yeah.
Yeah. So we actually did the first thing we did was the casting after finishing the script, because that was like the core of the film. If we didn't have a cast, we wouldn't do it. So that was the first thing we approached. We did an exhaustive casting here. And then we worked on different chemistry tests to see how did they combine, the entire picture. So we tried different combinations of actors, and we got this one. And then we had like a ton of rehearsals trying to develop the relationship between each of them. Like, each of the characters has a specific paragraph describing how they feel towards each of the other characters. So it was like a huge work on character development and casting, like hand in hand. And the actors also helped a lot developing the different traits of each of them. So, because that was like the main challenge, to like get a grasp on how different they are from each other in like 1 minute into the short film.
My last question, again, kind of about the business and release of your film, or also on the financing. So many, unlike in the United States, so many countries support independent filmmaking or have film funds. I'm curious if you could just tell us a little bit about how you put the project together, whether Uruguay supports short filmmaking or helps fund these projects. What was your experience?
Yeah, so we have like a national fund from our film commission. That fund we didn't take, but we didn't get it. But then we had like a Montevideo Town Hall fund, which is Montevideo Filma, which is the opening logo in our film, and they grant us their fund. But we found out like the last day of shooting that we got the award. So we actually shot with our money, and then we were able to compensate, like to get it back. So that was like the best news to wrap the film, because that was on the last day of the shoot. So yeah, that was the run. And then about distribution, we were able to sell it to the film commission in Ecuador, and another one, I think it was Turkey. And then we got a sales agent that has the film, which is Premium Films, and they are working with our film closely. So that's nice.
Great. Well, again, thank you for joining us. I want to invite all the filmmakers turn their cameras back on, and we'll take a couple of questions. I know we're approaching a 1 hour mark, but we'd sure love to hear. I know there's been a lot of active questions in the chat. If anybody has a question, you can raise your hand, or we can reference a question in the chat. I'll sort of start while we're waiting to see. I have kind of a broader question for the whole group. one of the things I noticed when we were putting this program together was the incredible amount of strong Spanish language content in our film pool. And I'm just curious if anybody wants to comment on whether your films have been seen by Spanish language audiences and whether you have noticed a difference in the reaction or reception of your films to a Spanish language population versus an English audience. And Freddie, I'll give you a second to just repeat the question, and then if anybody would like to comment, you can just jump in.
Miguel está diciendo que cuando estaba haciendo este programa notó que había muchos películas muy fuertes en el idioma de español y quería saber cómo han reactado las audiencias que hablan español contra las audiencias internacionales o aquí en los Estados Unidos.
Disculpa, la pregunta es ¿para mí o para todos?
A todos.
No one wants to tackle that or has any thoughts about that?
I mean, personally, I didn't get the chance to see the reaction of anyone, like English spoken person. It's my film premiere and then the pandemic came, so I wasn't able to go to any festival. But I think it was a huge challenge at the moment of creating the subtitles for the film. Definitely, because many things we were very afraid they wouldn't translate. But it's a question mark for me now.
Any are behind the scenes crew, any questions or someone coming in?
Yeah, Damien's got a question, a student. I can promote him if you're ready for him.
Yeah, great.
Okay, Damien, go ahead. Hey, Damien, you're on.
You can turn your camera on if you want.
Yeah, it's just a quick question about because I am I know this doesn't have to relate with anything about this, but about what was it? Oh, One of These Days, about the character of Manny and all that. You know, it's what I like about that one is just, you know, making, you know, that moral choice of like, you know, doing what's right for you and what's right for the family. So I'm just genuinely of, you know, whether or not his decision of pursuing sorry about that, pursuing his career was the better choice than, you know, staying with his, you know, his younger sister, in which that was basically the only family, you know, he had left after his father's been deported.
I appreciate the question. Unfortunately, we don't have Rudy here, who is the director of that, to respond, you know, from a story perspective. He is an LA-based filmmaker that I know his story is somewhat autobiographical, and the challenge you're referencing, you know, is something, you know, personally that reflects his own sort of personal experience. But I'm afraid I don't think I have anything I can add to that. But thanks for your feedback. Anybody else? Any last minute thoughts? Any?
There was, I'll jump in real quick, Mike. There was a couple questions to Alejandra about coverage, and I know a bunch of my students are in the class, and we talk about pre-production and kind of planning what shots you're going to use. This morning before the Q&A, we were talking about the Blue Cape. Well, we're talking about all the films, but the production design is so efficient and kind of streamlined. So I guess I'd just open it up to any of the filmmakers if they want to talk about the pre-production. In the chat, Alejandra had mentioned that it was clear to her that she didn't want to use the close-up at the end. It seems like an obvious choice to use the close-up, which is maybe a good reason not to use it. But I just wanted to throw that out if anyone wanted to comment. I guess specifically what I was looking at was like pre-production wise, does any, how much prep do you all do? Did you do storyboarding? Did you, what was it, more kind of doc style, letting the actors move around in the space and then photographing it that way? Or how did you all approach your pre-production? Or any of you, it doesn't have to be all of you.
I can talk a little bit. Because it's a little bit unique because the person who shot, the cinematographer of my movie is also the person who I co-wrote and co-directed the movie with. And while he is the cinematographer and I usually do the editing, we're very collaborative in terms of trying to understand. And we also really enjoy telling a story visually. That's one of our favorite parts about movie making. So we're pretty specific about trying to be on the same page about what we're doing ahead of time. And we don't do a lot of storyboarding, but just a lot of long conversations in which we're talking about what it is. And so it's pretty easy to imagine, especially if you have the plate location in mind. But I will say with the dishwasher, a couple things. We found a strange piece of reference for that movie, which is going to sound ridiculous, but was Ocean's 12, the Steven Soderbergh movie. We wanted to sort of have a playful, like caper kind of vibe to a story that could otherwise be told kind of like a straight drama, I guess. And so, and also, I just think Soderbergh, we've always really admired how bare bones he approaches a lot of his shoots, even though at this point he could shoot however he wanted. And that movie especially, I thought was just kind of experimental almost for being as big a movie as it was. So we had a lot of very specific reference points from that movie to ours. Like for instance, the scene when he's texting in the basement of the first restaurant that he goes to, there's a scene that's like the most literal, where it very closely is similar to the scene with Brad Pitt where he's talking on the phone and it goes around him in I think 3 or 4 shots on tripod. But I would say though, what's interesting is once we actually we had all this planned very thoroughly, and then when we got to the actual shoot start, like day before, and we were walking around the space, just some of the stuff didn't feel right, or we had new ideas. So we actually, I would say, kind of reimagined the actual shots that are in the movie. Maybe 75% of them we ended up finding ahead of time. So I feel like there was a lot of prep to try to understand why we were trying to do what we were trying to do. But then when we would shoot, you would try to be sensitive to if there was something not feeling right or if there was another idea. We worked very collaboratively with the actors as well. So a lot of times they would have ideas about elements of the story that would then go, well, if we do that, I think that's a cool idea, but the way we had planned it isn't going to work. So we would try to, come up with new ideas as we went.
Anyone else want to jump in? Alejandra, did you storyboard? No.
I'm also a writer of the script, so I had very clear the shots that I wanted as I was writing the script. Obviously, it changes once you see the location, but if it's a wide, it will still be a wide. If I want to do like a 180 of the kid with the cape, then I'm gonna do a 180 with the cape. But what I am my only suggestion is always be open, because the crew is also an artist. like the take of the little boy, like it was looking up. That was the DP suggestion, you know, and I'm like, sure, why not? You know, this is a film is it's a collaborative effort, you know, so I'm more than welcome for the same crew to give me notes. But as long as you have your vision very, very clear, the audience shouldn't have a problem understanding your movie.
Well, we were just so honored to have you all join us today. It was great to learn about the behind the scenes of your movies, and we wish you the best of luck moving forward in your filmmaking careers. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the audience and to the Alexander Valley Film Society. We have incredible lineups of shorts. I hope if this was the first shorts panel you look at our other 3 collections. There's a huge number of filmmakers joining us all week and great panels and Q&As. Today, I believe the 499 Q&A with Rodrigo Reyes is happening around 3 o'clock, so you'll want to check that out. I wish everyone the best. Thanks, everybody. We hope to see you at a future film festival event. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.